Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, we've got a real expert on the show today, Heidi, who's going to be talking to us about strategies and things for managing grief, particularly working with families and that kind of thing. So I know we're going to give our audience a lot of good information today. Heidi, would you please introduce our guest?
Sure, Mom, I'd love to. So as you said, we're going to be talking about strategies for families managing grief. And our guest today is Lara Krawchuk. She is a licensed clinical social worker and the owner and clinical director of Healing Concepts, LLC, a private therapy practice in Pennsylvania. She is also the co-owner of Healing Perspectives. And Lara is an adjunct lecturer for the University of Pennsylvania School of Social Policy and Practice and a practicum faculty with Robert Niemeyer's Institute for Loss and Transition. We love Bob Niemeyer, and he used to be on our board at Open to Hope. Fabulous place, the Portland Institute. So welcome to our podcast, Lara.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for having me.
You know, we were talking to you early on about how our number one visit at Open to Hope is actually adults losing parents. And I know, looking at some of your material, that was a pivotal moment for you when your dad died, right?
Yeah, my dad got sick when I was 16, and he was pretty okay for a long time. And then it just started to take a downward trajectory. His blood disorder turned to cancer, and it was pretty harrowing, lots of pain and suffering. And when he died, I was having children, I had babies. My mom kind of dropped out of the picture because of her grief. And I can definitely speak to how lonely it is to be a 30-something trying to raise babies, literal babies, and grieve, and how little information is out there. So it's such a great thing that you all are offering this. It's lonely, it's scary.
Sometimes not as much support, maybe, because you're not living at home and it's still a very significant loss. I mean, you never knew the world without your dad in it.
Yep, and he was one of my favorite people, and I needed him when I had new babies. I needed both of their help, and instead we were at a dying man's bedside and then at a funeral, and then my mom just felt like she couldn't be there without him. So secondary losses were huge.
And
That's a lot.
Your mom herself, in the next year had a heart problem, right?
She sure did. She had what sometimes gets called broken heart syndrome. She'd known him since she was in college. She skipped graduation to marry him. And when he died, she just got kind of lost. And she did. She had her first heart attack that March. So just 3 months later. She's done well. She's doing great.
Yeah, and now this is how many years later, 19 years later, that she's doing fine now. But that just shows you the kind of stress that a loss puts, a family through.
Yeah, enormous.
The visitation that your mother had.
Had that he visited her the night she had her heart attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a dream. And he's never done that since with her. We believe he visits in birds. He's a cardinal.
I love it.
But he came to her that night as clear as day, and she never could figure out, was he trying to get her to come with him or telling her to get to the doctor, which she did, and stay with us.
And he was a cardiologist, right?
He was a cardiologist, so it was especially poignant. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, what do you wish you'd had that you are giving people now? What kind of advice did you wish you had at that time, or help?
I wish I had gotten a therapist. I didn't really know how to do that. I didn't know how to get someone who was really knowledgeable about grief, and because I was already teaching grief and loss classes, I I just resisted that. And so I didn't have a lot of helpers. I didn't have a lot of people to help me untangle things. And then I also really very much wish I had known internal family systems, IFS, it's called, because the combination of making sense of a loss and trying to figure out what just happened, why did it happen, why did it happen now when I'm having babies, um, that would have been helped, that process of spinning around trying to figure out what just happened and who am I would have been helped by being able to name what we call parts and to understand how to better support these parts of me that were just absolutely devastated from the loss of my dad. Um, I would have probably also understood some of the challenges my mom and I had because she had had a postpartum depression when I was born. And so my dad was kind of the hero of my story, if you will, when I was very, very little. And IFS would have given me a lens for understanding some of that because that came back up when he died.
So your relationship with your mother was strained.
For a while, yeah. And that was not her fault. That was me. That was my parts having some sort of reaction to stuff that happened when I was born. But then when my safe, great, wonderful person wasn't in the world anymore, I kind of decompensated a bit.
I want to step back a little bit because you were asked to teach a grief class at that time, right?
Mm,
When your father died. I happened to have been teaching at the University of Rochester at that time, and I was a clinical nurse specialist for the whole surgical service. So I taught grief and loss all the time. And then it happened to me, and it was like, wow, I didn't even know what I was talking about. But I found myself after 2 weeks going back to work, working with students and also trying to be, I was overly competent, I would say, for a couple of years. I was pretty brittle. I was pretty much in control. I
yeah.
mean, you know, did
Yep.
you find that same thing with you?
Yeah, you're trying to hold on by fingernails, just like grasping onto anything you can. And I felt very lucky to be asked to teach that class literally the week he was dying. I mean, they did not know. And so a lot of what I created was created at his bedside. Uh, and I felt lucky to be able to be reading that in the context of a loss because it does feel so differently once you're living it and just that gave me at least something to lean into. But yes, brittle, yes, very, very, very
And
brittle.
it is interesting to lose a family member from a family system standpoint because when I lost my brother, he was our only brother. It's like you've got so many, your family's out of balance. And then again, when I lost my dad, I had to negotiate a different relationship with my mom because I was used to having them both there, and I didn't realize the roles he played till he wasn't there.
Mhm.
We have a good relationship, but it was just it throws everything off. It throws like
Throws everything
and
off.
there's a void because there's roles that are no longer filled, and it's very disorienting.
Yeah, I think it's shocking how much it throws everything off and how um, people in the same family can't necessarily be the supports to one another.
Hmm.
And that's shocking. That went on in my family and caused some real problems. And we did not have a good way. This is where I wish I had had the therapist to communicate about that. And so a lot went underground and festered and became troublesome in ways that we hadn't been struggling before. So it really throws a
It's
wrench into families dynamic.
yeah, that's interesting you're saying that because when my brother died, people would ask me, "Oh, you've got sisters, you've got two sisters. I bet you're with each other, supporting each other all the time." And I'm like, "We're close, but we're kind of sometimes avoiding the topic. Like we're
Hmm.
not necessarily supporting each other. It's almost too painful to go there."
Yep. I think that's very common, and I always wonder why it's not studied more.
Hmm.
Like, what's up with
Yeah, I love that.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
When
sibling relationships and just the families getting all messed up
Yeah.
because of a loss and not knowing how to support each other. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
so many different variations. And I sold a house. In fact, I've sold 3 properties, and I have 3 daughters, and I've asked them to go in and clean out the property and do what they want with the items.
Wow.
That's been kind of fascinating, and them dealing with it. It's almost like I've died and given over the property. I've just said to them, go ahead and do it. It was a big ask. Was it a
Yeah,
big ask, Heidi?
and the IFS therapist in me gets curious about it. Like, what part of you wanted them to do it instead of you? And it's just like we don't really know how to ask each other these questions.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Why didn't I want to do it? And I think
Mhm.
just my personality, I just didn't. I wanted to move on. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want, and I wanted to sell the property. We
Yeah,
had a summer home in Carmel, California, and I had told my husband before he died that if when he died or if he died, I would sell the property right away because
yeah.
he loved it down there. For me, it's a little dark and cold, and I didn't even want to go down. So kind
Mhm.
of
Yeah,
interesting. But I don't know. I've never asked the girl.
It's interesting, Lara, because I never asked my mother, why are you not doing this? You
yeah,
know, I
yeah.
avoided that question, and that was kind of the elephant in the room.
Yeah,
Why
well,
are we doing
that's
this
kind
and
of how
not
the
you?
parts work. That's how parts work, right? Like somebody does
Right?
something, then you have a part that avoids the something, and we
Yeah.
parts are talking to each other, and we don't always get the information we need to kind of sort it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because if you don't have a third party, that's what I love about family therapy, because I was a family therapist for many years. And I love family therapy because you have somebody there talking to the whole family and asking these questions,
Hmm.
Yeah.
about what's going on here. Fortunately, we have a pretty I think a solid, interesting family because of my son's death 40 years ago.
Hmm.
I think that has kind of changed and of course Heidi's a psychologist and so am I, and you know, so I don't know. What do you think about it, Heidi?
I think that losing Scott at 17 so suddenly and traumatically really made me realize that I wanted to hold on tight to my sisters because siblings can die. And we can't assume that anyone is going to be on the earth forever, not to be, we don't know. Like you said, Laura, your dad died young.
Yeah.
So we don't know what's going to happen. So I think it did. I think that, if you look at post-traumatic growth in that research, and I know you know this, Laura, because you're a professor, it shows that we really value relationships and we don't take them for granted often after a loss.
Mhm.
Yep. And I also think some of the growth for me was, if I have a dream to do it, get out there and do it.
Hmm.
Don't wait. If I travel with my boys who are now young men, and we try to do all these things together because we can right now, and we
Yeah.
don't ever take anything for granted. And they were born into that kind of loss. That's very acute
Hmm.
for them. One met him, one didn't, because he almost died the first one's birth, and then he did right before the second one. And so they have a lexicon of loss that I think changed the trajectory of their lives, made them actually, I think, pretty sensitive, like, and very connected to us because they're aware that anything can happen.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So I wanted to talk to you about witnessing because I know that reading some of your things, I was thinking about that, about what people can do for us in the area of grief and loss and what you need. Can you talk a little bit about witnessing?
Sure. To me, there's a couple of kinds of witnessing. One is people need the story of the death witnessed sometimes, often. The only time I would put a cautionary note on that is if there's trauma and they're very dysregulated from the story, um, which can happen with trauma. But people need to be able to tell the story and tell the story and tell the story, and that's not them doing it wrong. So that can be a really helpful role for therapists and coaches to witness. And then people need and I needed this witnessed a lot, like the relationship, whether it was good, bad, ambivalent. People often need to talk a lot about that. I need to talk about how special my dad was to me and me to him, and over and over and over, hit repeat.
I think people assume that if you were close, it's going to be harder, and that's not always true. You
No.
mentioned ambivalent, and sometimes if it's been an ambivalent relationship, it's really hard because there's no time to repair that now. So
Yep.
I appreciate that you mentioned that.
Yeah, there's a lot of assumption about who can grieve and who can't grieve and how you should grieve,
Mhm.
all of which usually is wrong. Like assuming anything
Yeah.
in grief and loss is usually not a great idea.
You mentioned the third stage.
There's
Uh-huh.
also the witnessing of things that get tripped into with a loss. Like for instance, I had a little baby inside me who just latched onto my dad because my mom was depressed, after my birth. And my dad would come home and light up with joy and put me on his chest. And I have a visceral memory of all of this.
Wow.
And when he died, she was this baby who lives inside me, right? Because that's our belief in internal family systems, that these are children that got wounded are still in there. And she, who had been fine until he died, just, it's like I threw a 0 to 1 tantrum. Like she couldn't stop being upset. And at the time, I didn't understand this at all because hadn't learned IFS enough yet. And so she is actually sometimes I still have to work with that. And then I had another 3-year-old who, when my brother was born, I think she latched onto my dad again, probably especially because the baby hadn't gotten what she needed. And so the 3-year-old also was just bereft when he was gone. I just didn't feel safe in the world at all. And it wasn't rational. It didn't track cognitively rationally. And my mom couldn't comfort it because these little ones needed my dad. And so
And the
internal,
little ones were the internal little ones in you.
internal
Okay.
little ones. Yep.
Yeah.
So IFS believes that we have little versions of us inside that
Mm-hmm.
still need
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Your inner child.
Your inner children. Yep.
Okay. This makes sense.
And
And so
so,
suddenly the person that was the comfort is no longer there.
right. And they're too young to really understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, there was a lot of challenge to adjusting to his loss because I had this stuff going on that I didn't really understand. And so, part of what I do with people is help them tease out, this is the current loss, but it woke up these losses
Mm-hmm.
Past
or these
history.
traumas.
I think, do we have a wise guide inside? Is that one of the things you talk about?
Yeah, so we in IFS we believe there's a wise guide. We call it True Self, and it's just got kind of all the wisdom of the universe. It's very interesting when you do IFS to watch it because people get very calm when it's present. They can they can do things that emotionally they didn't think they could. They can go back to the young ones and heal them, which I've had to do.
For those of us that have wounded young ones, whoever's listening, how do you go back and heal that wound?
Sure. So with an IFS therapist, you're going to identify the the adult parts and then these young parts. And very often we have parts of us that are trying to avoid the pain of the young ones. Like they exile it. They want it to go away, right? Stop crying. It's enough already. And so in IFS, we help people identify those young ones, and then literally meet them, witness them, understand what the injury was. Um, and so I guess my little one didn't get held enough because my mom was depressed. And my dad held the little one. And then when my dad died, the little one could not, it's like a trauma. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the little one couldn't differentiate time, right? So the little one felt like it was happening again. And
Oh,
so in
wow.
IFS, you literally build a relationship with adult parts, grieving parts, and then the young ones, if the grieving person can handle that. So it took me a while to be stable enough in my grief to be able to go back and work with the little ones.
So this is called
Internal Family Systems, IFS. It's probably the fastest growing model of therapy in the planet right now. It's got it's been evidence approved. It's got an evidence base growing still. I can imagine how hard to measure all that kind of thing is. But it's robust and growing, and clinicians love it.
How would I find you, and how would I find somebody to help me with that?
Yeah, so I do use IFS both in my therapy practice in Pennsylvania and my coaching practice, which is international. And so there are therapists and coaches that do some of this stuff. And you can find Psychology Today's Therapist Finder. If you just keyword IFS, it'll pop up people who are trained. The IFS Institute is the place to find people who have just been trained with the gold standard, their training, which is, for me, was a year of training.
People can work with you as a coach if they're listening and they're not in Pennsylvania, which is great.
Yeah. I started a coaching business because I wanted to be able to work with people who had losses anywhere. And my license.
Understandable. I love this.
So how can people find you?
I have two businesses. So Pennsylvania is Healing Concepts LLC in Westchester, Pennsylvania. If they Google that, it'll pop it up. And then my coaching business, you can go to yourhealingperspectives.com. And my business partner, Emily, and I both do IFS coaching and grief coaching. That's what we do. And then if you're a therapist who wants to train more in what I'm talking about, I do a lot of trainings.
All right.
Yeah.
So if you've got one last piece of advice for somebody who's recently had the loss of a parent, what would it be?
Get help, get a therapist or someone, because trying to tough it out on your own it just lengthens the process. It's going to be hard, but it is less painful to do it in the care of someone who's really looking out for you and has some knowledge in grief and loss.
Great.
I like that, Lara. And while we're on the topic of the death of a parent, I just want to say that it doesn't matter how old your parent is and if they've lived a good life. We still miss them when we've not known our own life without them.
Mhm.
Absolutely. There's no rules in grief. Anybody who tries to say it should look a certain way is, I disagree with them. But yeah, I don't think they're being honest. There's no rules, and people need to get the support that they need, and it's never too late. I worked with someone who was 85 who was grieving a loss at 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I love it.
Well, thank you so much for being on our show today and for all the work you're doing to help people.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. Thank you for all the great work you do too.
Thanks, Lara, and thank you for helping people find hope after loss.
We want to thank everybody for joining us on this show today. And Heidi and I always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.